So you've probably heard it, right? Renting is just throwing money away. Maybe your parents told you, or a coworker, or just some guy you got cornered by at a weekend barbecue. Well, I need you to lean in and pay close attention to this explainer, because that one little sentence is a massive, guilt-inducing societal myth. And honestly, it has pushed thousands of people into the biggest financial mistake of their lives. We hear it constantly, but here's the fascinating reality. Buying a house isn't always the right answer either.
Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're absolutely dismantling that whole rent versus buy pressure. We're stripping away the fluff, ignoring all the unsolicited advice from your neighbor, and using a highly logical, math-based framework. Our goal here is simple: to help you figure out which option actually makes sense for you, based entirely on real numbers and your unique situation.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. First up, the throwing money away myth. Then, we'll dive into the real cost comparison, the 5 factors that decide it, the emotional side, and finally, your 3-step decision guide.
All right, Section 1, the throwing money away myth.
We've got to tackle this right out of the gate, because honestly, it drives financial planners absolutely crazy. When you pay rent, you're actually getting something super valuable: a roof over your head, zero maintenance headaches, the freedom to just pack up and move, and absolutely no financial risk if the local market decides to tank. But owning? Well, nobody tells you about the unrecoverable costs. Homeowners basically throw money away too. Think about property taxes, usually 1 to 2% of the home's value every single year. On a $500,000 house, that's like 5 to 10 grand just poof, gone. Then there's maintenance. You've got to budget another 1 to 2% for that. Roofs, HVAC systems, exploding pipes, it adds up fast. Throw in homeowners insurance, HOA fees, massive closing costs, and oh yeah, the big one, mortgage interest. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine a standard mortgage on a $400,000 home at, say, a 6.5% interest rate. Your monthly payment? Probably around $2,100. But here's the kicker. In the early years of that loan, 80 to 90% of that payment is pure interest. Literally over $1,800 goes straight into the bank's pocket. You're actually building equity with only about $270 of that first payment. The rest? It's just as gone as a rent check. Okay, moving on to Section 2, the real cost comparison.
So when people claim renting is a waste, they're completely ignoring about half of what homeownership actually costs. Both paths mean paying for the right to live somewhere. Let's do the math dollar for dollar. Picture a mid-sized city. You're eyeing a $450,000 home. Buying means putting 20% down, so that's 90 grand out of pocket right away. Your mortgage at 6.5% sits around $2,275 a month. But wait, we have to add in those unrecoverable costs we just talked about: taxes, insurance, maintenance. That tacks on another $950. Your true monthly cost to own? Over $3,200. Meanwhile, renting a very similar place in the exact same neighborhood might only cost you $2,100 flat. In this specific scenario, renting is literally over $1,100 cheaper every single month.
Now, does that mean renting is always the magic bullet? Well, no, not necessarily. Renting is significantly cheaper right now in our scenario, for sure. But we have to be real. Rents do go up. In a decade, that $2,100 rent could easily spike to $2,700. On the flip side, when you buy, your core mortgage payment stays perfectly fixed. Plus, home values have historically appreciated by about 3 to 4% a year on average, and you are slowly, steadily building equity that compounds over time. Fast forward 10 years, and you've actually knocked out a solid chunk of that principal.
But hey, the renter has a secret weapon here too. Remember that $1,100 a month you saved by renting instead of buying? What if a disciplined renter took those savings and invested them in low-cost index funds? Assuming an average 7% return over 10 years, they'd be sitting on roughly $190,000. That's massive. So the honest answer to which is better isn't just a simple one-liner. It's like a giant puzzle. It depends entirely on how long you stay, what the housing market is doing, and crucially, what you do with the money you save.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 5 factors that decide it. Factor number 1 is your break-even horizon. And honestly, this is the single biggest deciding factor. It all comes down to how long are you staying put. Financial pros calculate how many years you need to own the home before buying mathematically beats renting. In more affordable markets, that horizon might just be 2 to 4 years. But if you're in a super expensive city, it can easily be 7 to 10 years or even longer. Bottom line, if there's any chance you're moving in 3 years, renting almost always takes the win. Factor number 2 is your highly localized market, and we measure this using something called the price-to-rent ratio. Real estate is hyperlocal, right?
A $500,000 house in Detroit and a $500,000 house in Austin are totally different ballgames. To find your ratio, just divide the home price by the annual rent for a comparable place. If your number is under 15, the math definitely leans toward buying. But if it's over 20, renting is very often the smarter financial play. Factor number 3 is your financial cushion. Buying a house should absolutely not wipe out your bank account. You don't just need the down payment. You need an extra 2 to 5% of the total purchase price just to cover closing costs. And, most importantly, this is crucial, you need a solid 3 to 6 month emergency fund sitting safely in the bank after the purchase is totally done. If buying leaves your savings empty, you are exactly one broken furnace away from a total personal financial meltdown. Moving on to factor number 4, income stability. Remember, a mortgage is a rigid 30-year legal commitment. If your income fluctuates, say you're in a commission-heavy role or you're self-employed with some slow months, you really have to ask yourself if you want that massive, unmoving anchor tied to your budget right now. Renting buys you an easy exit strategy. A mortgage does not. And finally, factor number 5, opportunity cost. The hidden cost of that down payment is wild when you really look at it. That 90 grand isn't just money sitting around, it is powerful capital. If you didn't buy the house and instead took that $90,000 of initial capital and dropped it into a diversified stock portfolio growing at 7%, it would practically double in 10 years. We're talking around $177,000. So the question becomes, are you confident your home's appreciation will outpace the stock market? In some places, absolutely yes. In others, not even close. All right, let's shift gears a bit. Section 4, the emotional side. Up until now, we've been treating this like a pure math problem. But let's take a breath and get real for a second. Personal finance is inherently, well, personal. There is a deeply meaningful, totally non-financial value to owning your space. You can paint the walls whatever color you want, adopt a dog without begging a landlord, build a backyard garden, and truly put down roots in a community. For a lot of folks, that's a major life goal. But look at the flip side, the non-financial value of renting. There is immense mental freedom there. You have the ultimate mobility to chase a dream job across the country. You get to enjoy the low-stress reality of knowing a leaking roof is completely someone else's problem. Keeping your monthly obligations lower means you can travel, invest aggressively, or, frankly, just sleep better at night. Neither of these is wrong. But here is exactly where we have to draw the line. I love this quote because it hits the nail right on the head. What I'd push back on is making the decision based on social pressure. Seriously, do not buy a house just because your parents had one at your age, or because your entire friend group is suddenly buying, or because society keeps whispering that it's time. Those are hands down the absolute worst reasons to take on the single biggest financial commitment of your whole life. And that leads us to Section 5, your 3-step decision guide. So, how do we actually make this call without all the built-in guilt? Well, we put together a super practical, actionable roadmap to help you finally make this decision with confidence. Let's walk through it. Step 1, calculate your breakeven. Jump online and pull up the New York Times rent versus buy calculator. It's totally free, highly detailed, and honestly the best tool out there for this. Plug in your own local numbers. If the math says your breakeven horizon is longer than you actually plan to stay in the home, you should rent. Step 2, check your financial readiness. Can you drop 20% down without draining your emergency fund? Yes? Awesome. No? Then set a savings target instead of stretching yourself dangerously thin. Step 3, consider your life trajectory. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself here. Where do you genuinely want to be in 5 years? If the answer is unclear, remember that renting buys you optionality, and optionality is incredibly valuable. If even one of these boxes is shaky, renting isn't settling, it is a highly strategic financial move. Okay, so what is the big takeaway from this explainer? Here is the absolute bottom line. Renting is not throwing money away. Buying is not some magical automatic wealth generator. Both paths can be incredibly smart financial choices depending entirely on your numbers, your local market, your timeline, and your specific life goals. The only real mistake you can make here, rushing in without thinking it through and just blindly following outdated advice. Which leaves us with one final vital question for you to ponder. Are you letting the math or the myth drive your next move? Take the time to run your own numbers, protect your peace of mind, and make a choice completely free from societal guilt. You've got the tools now to make the absolute smartest move for your future. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and hey, happy calculating.